We're going to launch right into the next talk. I'm super excited about this coming talk. Polly Allen has over 20 years experience building software, leading software teams, most recently as principal product manager for Alexa AI at Amazon. She led the development and launch of the first generative AI answers on Alexa in 2020. And yes, it did use transformer models like those that drive ChatGPT. Her company, AI Career Boost, helps forward-thinking software business leaders unlock their AI superpowers to lead AI initiatives. She was named one of the top 100 women of the future in 2023. That's amazing. When she's not working, you can find her scuba diving around the world with whale sharks in Mexico or turtles in Thailand, or picking up amazing art in Nicaragua that you can check out in the background of her shot. Please join me in welcoming Polly Allen.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for today's presentation. So we'll be talking today about AI-powered prototyping for non-coders, non-coding creatives. It's an area, it's a deep passion of mine, and I'm excited. I hope you'll be encouraged to dive in yourself after today's presentation. We've just had a wonderful introduction to who I am, but just for a little bit more background, I do have 20 years experience in software development. So I do come from the techie world. I did move into product management in software, which is more along the lines of what should we build and why, along with the considerations of how it should look and work for users. Given my background in technology, I've really stuck close to the more techie side of these products. And most recently, I was working at Alexa AI, working in generative AI. We launched those first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. So people are often interested and surprised to learn that generative AI has been around for a lot longer than ChatGPT, which has just blown up in the last 6 months or so. As mentioned, I am the CEO and founder of AI Career Boost. So my mission once I left Amazon was really to increase diversity in ranks of AI leadership, especially folks who have more experience in design and the creative side. I see a lot of them not feeling really like they're included or asked to be a part of AI initiatives, or they get intimidated by it and feel like they can't access that. So that's really why I founded AI Career Boost, is to try and increase the number of people who have access to careers in AI as it affects our working life day to day, and the tools that we're using to do that. So today's talk, I wanted to talk first a little bit about large language models in particular and how they're changing the current landscape of tools and of work. And then I wanted to show you some no-code prototype examples, from some really advanced ones to some simple things that you could get working today in half an hour, I promise. Then we'll go through some other no-code tools you might look at if you're looking to dive a little deeper, and we'll finish up with some Q&A. So talking about the current landscape and large language models, most people are familiar with this tool. This is ChatGPT. In case you haven't seen the version that you pay for, if you pay for ChatGPT Plus for $20 a month, this is the version that showcases different models, right? They allow you access to the more advanced GPT-4 model. And they also allow you access to beta features that as they're released. What was interesting when ChatGPT first came out, a lot of folks in the industry said, really, this is the thing that's going to get us to 1 billion users more rapidly than any other app. It isn't even the most advanced model, right? The text transformer-based models have been around in industry for a while and used by a lot of tools generating content under the hood. And so because a lot of the downsides of them has been known for a while, right? We'll talk about those nearer to the end. But things like hallucinations, the fact that they make factual or logical errors, it has led people to wonder, what really is the advantage of using these tools? Fortunately, there have been more and more studies coming out that are showing that ChatGPT in particular really does provide the boosts that people have been hyping. So it's not just a passing fad or a bubble in that respect. There are studies that show that business writing efficiency can be increased by 15 to 37% with the same quality as the original documents, doing it by hand. And writing code is another area where you can see huge efficiencies using these tools to help us write them as sort of as a co-pilot, right? One area that's really hard to measure is how much boost in efficiency we're getting for creative activities like brainstorming, validating ideas, facing down that blank page, right? So that's the kind of thing I see creatives really providing a lot more feedback and a lot more direction for the tools in the future in terms of what they need and what's a good idea to really boost creativity. So given the popularity of ChatGPT, we've seen this explosion of other models out there. There's some of the most well-known ones include Google's Bard. There's a recent release from a company called Anthropic of Claude 2. There's another one called Cohere. There's a whole myriad of them out there, many of which, if they're run by these companies, they are accessible to you for free to try out as well. And it's interesting to see sometimes the differences these different models create in the output that they give you. There's also a whole world of open source models, meaning the communities of practice have provided some of these. Meta originally provided a lot of the base of some of these models out to the community so that they could tinker with them and use for free, so that companies can actually have their own versions of these models that they can then fine tune specifically for a particular task or a particular tool. And really what I'm seeing is a real divide growing between there's a population of people who are just end users of these tools, and then the population of people who are building using them. It's very interesting to see that there's a lot of, online activity around how to use ChatGPT, what's the best practices for prompting, how to get the most out of it. But there's also a lot of real fervor around how do we best use these tools in the back end and engineering systems in making really creative applications based on large language models. So because of this, we're seeing this explosion of tools, and you may be familiar with some of these headlines. I know I certainly got tired of them about in March. You still continue to see these 1,000 new AI tools you've got to know, these large websites with directories of AI tools that you've just got to check out. So given that there's so many tools out there to check out, how do you keep on top of them? I'm actually advocating for a completely different approach. So bear with me. So why, given all the tools that are out there, would you, as a creative professional, want to try to build your own tools or automate your own processes? Well, there's one good answer is that you can really integrate these tools as you like into your workflow. I was asked the other day about ChatGPT, and do I really have to, if I want to give it context of a document, I have to copy and paste that whole document into ChatGPT and then copy and paste the answers back? There's a new feature in Claude 2, where you can upload a file that it will use in context. In fact, it'll let you upload up to 10 files, I believe. But you're still kind of clunkily working between a bunch of tools, right? If you were able to actually use into these no-code tools to create something that you can use day to day that repeats some of these processes you're doing slowly in ChatGPT, one, it's integrated into your own workflow and your own tools in a way you like, but it's also personalized. You can personalize it to your own data in a way that isn't always possible with these other tools. It also gives you that consistency if you're working with other people on a team, to use the same brand voice, to use the same prompts in a way that's a lot easier for everyone and saves a lot of time. You may even be able to productize your own commercial product. And we'll look at an example in a second of people who've been able to do that and make really profitable products without touching a lick of code. So let's talk about the different potential applications in your day-to-day work. So whether you're looking at a customer service bot to kind of answer the primary questions you get from customers, or some kind of internal search over your own documents. Creating chatbots has become incredibly easy, and actually personalizing them to use your documents is something that's really cheaply and easily available. You could also use it for applications like having an expert that you can ask on a whole bunch of a range of topics, whether it's business or whether you actually want to give it a customer profile and have sort of a customer on call. You could always ask if you needed feedback or a brainstorming help, a critique of an idea, for example. That idea of brainstorming is huge, right? You can use these tools for brainstorming, and instead of using a generic prompt, you can definitely have a specific prompt specific to your business that you then can encode in a tool that's used by everyone at your business to really help make sure that you're getting the best use of these tools. So brainstorming, asking for particular different perspectives based on your customer base or your known weaknesses on the team. Of course, one of the biggest use cases for these tools is content creation, content repurposing. And we'll look at a demo how you might be able to do this very simply and easily if you're not interested in using some of these larger tools that are kind of all in one and do it for you from soup to nuts. And you can also look at automating processes. So anything where you're bringing in receipts to extract information from one document and put it in another document. This is another area where no-code tools have made this kind of automation really easy, plugging it into ChatGPT in the back end. I will add a note of caution here that it's definitely something that needs some human oversight. These tools still aren't reliable enough to definitely put things public facing and do things like anything that involves financial processes, for example. It can be really risky to try to use these and automate the results if you've seen it only work a few times and be effective because of the problems with factuality and hallucination. So always have someone checking things before they go out beyond your own walls. I promised we'd look at a case study of people who have had great success building prototypes and proofs of concept using no-code tools. If you're familiar with Copy AI, they are a copywriting tool that's used generative AI. As you see, they've been around since since 2021. And their original prototype that got them funded for $10 million was completely built with no-code tools. It was a tool called Webflow for the front end. And they had simply been using back-end models that were not as publicly available, but still publicly accessible back in 2021 to plug in a front end to generative AI and really prove out this concept. So using this tool for generating content, they have like a library of prompts as one of their features. So you can see here, you could generate an article, backlink outreach email, blog outline. This integrated tool is letting you both generate this within the tool instead of ChatGPT, but right in the tool, you can do things like add your own brand voice, right? You can ask it to analyze some of your existing writing and apply it to any of the things that you are writing. You can rewrite any existing content for a tone, again, suitable to your brand voice, increasing or decreasing the grade reading level. So all of these features in that tool are possible in ChatGPT, but you'd have to do a lot of work to know the right prompts, and it doesn't work into your workflow. Right. So it's an example of how they were able to build a whole business simply out of making these features of ChatGPT, these capabilities of ChatGPT accessible and part of your workflow. Let's look at another example that's a lot more simple and something you could implement right away. This is one of the examples of things that I take my students through in the courses at AI Career Boost, just to get an idea of how to build something useful quickly and easily so we can measure its predictability. So many folks in the software space, at least, use Slack as a collaboration tool. It's a chat tool where you and your team can be online chatting, similar to Discord or Microsoft Office. And with using Slack and a tool called Zapier, I've shown an example here how I could write a quick content repurposing tool that would be right in my chat application that I'm using every day today anyway, right? So within Zapier, you can provide your assistant instructions. In this case, I'm looking at Liquid Death, that I'm saying you're a helpful content specialist. The tagline for this brand is "Murder Your Thirst," and their tone is cheekily edgy and aggressive in a playful way. Take the following content idea and generate first a blog post outline, 2 Instagram posts optimized for virality, and 3 Facebook post content optimized for virality as well. And then I'm saying the content idea will go here. So this template, right, will be applied to everything I put. I've created a new channel in Slack where any idea I put in there, it will reply with this answer from ChatGPT. So as an example here, I've put in CNBC had a report yesterday about how Liquid Death CEO turned canned water into a $700 million company, just really taking a headline. And from that, right in my chat window, the response bot has given me an outline for a blog post, very focused on murdering thirst. And they've also looked at giving me Instagram posts and Facebook posts optimized for virality here. So if thirst had an arch enemy, it would be us. We're more than a water in a can. We're a $700 million thirst assassination squad. Any of you who have worked with these kinds of tools and repurposing content know that out of the box, the very first thing that they give you may not be the most brilliant thing or the thing that you actually want to put out there. And again, I think that's why it's important to always have humans and teams involved in reviewing what's there. But you can see this is a great way to get ideas, to start that spark of creativity. And you're not limited to having an assistant who is necessarily a content repurposing bot, right? You could ask it for help me brainstorm ideas on the following topic, help me get different perspectives. Here's the 3 different perspectives I want on these ideas. It's a way to really, when you're stuck looking at that blank page, or you want to take things a little bit further, can be a really great brainstorming partner that you can automate and use consistently inside your company. I wanted to do a quick deep dive on some no-code tools that might be of interest if you're interested at all in kind of starting to cobble together some integrations. So Zapier was the one I just showed you that we use with Slack. And it's been around for many years, but is seeing a real resurgence now with generative AI, because harnessing the power of generative AI in any other application is really a popular idea and results in a lot of efficiency. So some of their integrations include not only OpenAI and ChatGPT, but other models like Claude or Cohere. They have some tools like Chacksonic or Jasper. So it's always good to test out these different tools and see which ones really work for you and what you're trying to build. From there, once you have the model you're using, you can integrate it with a variety of other tools. So whether you're integrating with Slack, like we just demoed, you can integrate it with Google Documents. Every time you drop a file in one folder, it can use that as input, translate it in some way, and put a new document in another folder using instructions from ChatGPT. You can have it draft emails and even put them in your drafts folder for review before they get sent out. So there are more than 3,000 applications with integrations in Zapier. It's the leading sort of office integration tool out there. And it's very easy to use, point and click interface. I encourage you to check it out. Let's say you wanted to build a chatbot, though, that had a little more of your own content as what it's answering from, right? So whether you're using it as an internal search of a bunch of your content, or you want something that can really answer quickly questions that you have on a website for your customers. VoiceFlow is a great tool for quickly and easily creating chatbots. It's really, again, short point and click. They also have a feature where you can upload your own custom knowledge base. So whether you have PDF files, Word files that you want to upload, you can even point it at a web page or a whole sitemap of a website and have it crawl that content for you and answer directly from there. So it's still using the fluency that you get from using ChatGPT and that natural conversation, but it's really primarily answering from your documents. And that helps you be able to make a more focused chatbot that's really personalized to your space. The other great thing you can do with VoiceFlow is it's got a lot of control over the look and feel of the assistant that you're building, right? So you can control the brand image, message icon, the branding, and then with one click, you can create a chatbot that you can either deploy to a website, or they give you the snippet of code to include it in an existing website as a widget. So all of these features really make it super easy end to end for you to create a customized chatbot that you could get working very, very quickly. It does require a lot of testing, I think, to be sure that you're comfortable with this being customer facing. And we'll talk about some of those risks right after we finish talking about these no-code tools. The last one I'll mention is bubble.io. This is another alternative, is Flowwise. These are tools that really are meant as drag and drop app builders. So whether you're building a web app or an app for your phone, these tools make it really easy to drag and drop to design the interface. Some of them even can ingest files from Figma and other design tools like that as a starting point. But the real advance has been that now they can connect very easily to third-party tools like ChatGPT. You can ask it to mock up data to return it if you're trying to present a demo, right? If you were doing a demo for a client where the data didn't necessarily have to really connect to a real database, you could ask it to simply bring back some data in the following format that's realistic for X and Y scenario, right? Very quick and easy to build a demo for a client for a potential mock-up. I know there's several agencies that are using tools like Bubble to build apps for their customers. So if you're looking at getting a little more in depth yourself, it's worth looking into whether you're going to invest in learning these tools well enough to build your own applications, or at least prototypes of them. So let's talk a little bit about the risks and mitigations here. I know I get a lot of questions about these. Of course, these tools still do, even with GPT-4, which is much more reliable, they still have issues with hallucinations, logic errors, and even just no guardrails around exactly what you can ask about. VoiceFlow has some really nice features where you can control the first part of a conversation where people are asking initial questions to really understand if they're not asking questions about your domain, if they're trying to ask your chatbot, how do I build a bomb or other dangerous activities, you have the chance to say, I'm sorry, I'm a chatbot, I don't understand, like I'm not able to answer those kinds of questions. And so they're using a little bit of old school chat technology and natural language processing to allow you to build some guardrails around what the bot will and won't answer that are a little more restrictive than the underlying models. But we still have this problem of hallucination and logic errors that can arise for sure. Not all of the models that you're using are necessarily up to date, and this can definitely be an issue depending on your use case. If what you're trying to answer does require to be updated, especially if it needs to be updated daily, things like that. There are tools that allow you to scrape web results and then summarize those instead of using the underlying models directly. But again, it's an extra step, an extra hurdle, and it's easier to start with use cases that don't really require that out of the gate. One of the most scary things to me in helping people build on top of these large language models has been we're noticing that the model performance is changing, right? So there's been a lot of tech headlines recently that GPT-4's performance has been degrading. It's much worse now than it was in March or April. A lot of this was furor over around a particular study that had some very biased questions that were trying to prove how bad it was today compared to a few months ago. But whether you believe the performance has degraded or not, it's definitely answering questions differently than it did 3 months ago. And this degree of control isn't something that a lot of companies are comfortable giving up, right? And we don't always get a lot of notification or transparency as to when the underlying models have changed. This is why so many companies, when they're looking for really robust enterprise level tools, are looking at having open source models that they can control internally and just experimenting and prototyping with these third-party services like OpenAI's. The last one, of course, is really important if you're generating content. The part of the reason tools like Jasper and Copy.ai are popular is that they do some work to ensure that you're not violating copyright, that there is no plagiarism, because the underlying models are trained on a vast amount of online data. They say themselves that it's incredibly likely they may be copying some of that content directly from the content that it's been trained on. So depending on where this content will appear, right, you really need to say, am I willing to take that risk? Am I willing to put in the effort to double check the work? So I do recommend that people always start with some kind of internal process. If you're interested in getting better at this, an internal chatbot that searches your own documents is a really great starting place. Something that is generating content that you or someone on your team is going to be double checking, with the knowledge that these incredibly convincing errors can pop up. I think it's important that they're part of a workflow and that you're not automating end to end and just putting something in front of your end customer, right? Always have some human validation. And also, like I mentioned, checks for plagiarism and copyright. They're pretty essential to make sure that you're not putting yourself in any kind of legal risk or brand risk. So finally, if you're interested in diving in and learning more and learning how to build more prototypes, etc., or learning more about AI, I really encourage you all to get hands-on with these tools. I've definitely found their creative people seem to fall into two camps. There's folks who are afraid and don't want to learn about it. There's people who are diving right in and really excited to see how it can accelerate them. I don't think it's near or anytime in the future, the near-time future, at a place where it will replace creative work. And it's a chance for us to really embrace and lean into the human sides of things that involve context, that involve knowledge of the world around us. If you're interested in learning more about AI, and in particular building with AI, please check out my free AI learning guide on aicareerboost.com/learnai. And I'd love to welcome any questions if you guys have some.
Wow, thank you, Polly. That it's so interesting, sort of the evolution of the whole conversation today. That we just had a presentation that was really technical, really fascinating, but the technology can be somewhat intimidating, and I love to hear about the sort of the democratization of being able to really non-coders essentially being able to get in there and use these technologies and build their own tools. Love that. Great call to action. And thank you for sharing that resource as well on your slide.
My pleasure.
I do have some questions, so I'm going to dive in. So this question, I think you sort of answered it, but I'm going to ask it and then build on it. Kirsten is asking, most of those sort of thousands of tools that you mentioned at the beginning rely on essentially a connection to ChatGPT or another major engine. And I think you listed some of them. You mentioned OpenAI/ChatGPT, and then there's also Claude and Cohere. What are the differences there? What are these tools? Where do they lie on a kind of a continuum of usefulness or accuracy or performance?
This is the $1 million question right now. I think it's super interesting. All of the large language models that are available are general purpose models, right? You can ask the same model to code and to write a letter to your grandmother and to write a review, right? To sing a song. And in general, these general purpose models, what they're capable of is amazing, but for any one task, right? Actually fine tuning them for one task is actually going to beat out the performance of the general model, right? Where these different large language models are strong and are weak, in general, it's really there's no transparency around that right now, right? The benchmarks we have in industry are things like, in general, did people prefer the answers from this model over that model across all domains, across all tasks? And so if you want to know what the best model is for your particular task, really, at this point, you kind of have to go in and try them. There is no sort of standard place where people are saying, this is the best model for customer support, and this is the best model for consulting, right? And even the benchmarks to kind of measure that don't really exist yet. So because we're so early days, it's also new. I wish I had a better answer. There are some leaderboards on a website called Hugging Faces. It's a private company, huggingface.co. And they have leaderboards where a lot of the machine learning scientists are comparing these models day to day. So you can know generally which ones, especially the open source ones, are starting to compete in general capability with ChatGPT and other top models.
I think you probably just answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. What are the kind of new multimodal capabilities of these large language models? What will they mean for digital tools going forward? And do you see these? Do you see them specializing? Is that possibly going to become a thing?
It may become a thing. The specializing may become a thing as we move forward and they need to distinguish themselves. Let's talk first about multimodal capability, right? So GPT-4 was released. They famously did a demo at its release where they just took a picture of a website mock-up on a napkin and was able to build a live working website as part of that launch, right? Very, very cool. Those capabilities are not part of the public tool. This is several months later, right? And so this has been a trend with the multimodal kind of capabilities where everyone's really excited about them, who can build a very cool demo. But actually having tools that use it or having it publicly available is still hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it's a long way off. Obviously, it has these capabilities, right? So combining, we have text to image generation in the form of DALL-E 2. Those are getting productized in tools like Adobe's Firefly to really, really creative and cool effect. But that idea of, can it take a picture in? Could I ask a query and it generates an image in response? Even Bard, which had said, hey, in our latest update, we've actually got, images are here. If you dig a little deeper, they're returning images with answers. So they're taking existing images and returning them as part of the result. They're not generating images,
right,
in response to a query as including text and image together. So I do think it's an area. It's very exciting to see what's going to be possible, where you can imagine a model that can understand and glean from photos and then produce multimodal content as well. There's some amazing possibilities. One of my favorites has been, there's a nonprofit called Be My Eyes, and they have an app where people who are low visibility can go and take a picture of something and say, like, where is X in the vending machine? Or should I go down these stairs? Will I fall down and die? Real critical information for them to get around and navigate in the world. They've traditionally run a crowdsourced model where people have to be available to answer their questions. So you can imagine a model that can actually answer those kinds of questions based on images automatically. It's really exciting to think about what the possibilities might be.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a bit about this in terms of, setting up a chat on your chat bot in your own sort of content. But what are some other ways, or maybe the best ways to get started, especially if you're not techie, you want to learn how to use these AI tools, but you want to do some like coding without coding. Even if it's just for prototyping. I mean, I think that's a huge productivity gain. If we could be even generating prototypes without writing any code. So like, what are the best ways to get started for the designers in the audience?
Yeah. So the two things I've really seen people do are either start with chatbots, your kind of own chatbot, right? Which we kind of went over. You can really start just right in ChatGPT itself by saying, act like XYZ, right? In a lot of ways, English is the new programming language. If you want to go one step beyond chatbots, you can say, like, act like an application that does XYZ, right? Whatever you want your application to do. So you are an application that takes this kind of input and you do, and this is what you do to it, right? You no longer need code to make that effective. So you can try playing around right within ChatGPT as a very first step, right? Try some sample input, see what it does, see how you can improve your prompt using some of the prompt engineering techniques that are out there, and see how reliable you can make it, right? That's the hardest part of making tools with this at all. And that's why I really advocate it for prototypes or things that are going to accelerate you, but you're going to double check the work. It's very hard to make them reliable and robust enough for enterprise tools. That's a lot of engineering. But quickly making something to do any task you can think of is really surprisingly within our grasp right now.
You talked about open source models. What are the best ones?
So the Llama 2 that's just been released by Meta has made a lot of headlines and is definitely vaunted as the top contender for competing with ChatGPT. On some of those more generalized benchmarks I mentioned, it's meeting or exceeding ChatGPT 3.5 performance. It's you can actually go on Hugging Face's website and chat with it just like you can with ChatGPT to get an idea of what kinds of answers you might get from it. So they have a feature called Hugging Chat where you can try open source models. Normally, open source models, getting access to just try them out, can require some kind of a company willing to set them up somewhere, pay for the servers and the GPUs necessary to run them. But that's why it's nice that Hugging Face has made that available to the general public.
Yeah, you also talked about this sort of idea of, we have the end users over here, and then we have the builders over here, and will LLM close that gap? What do we need to do to accelerate that process of closing that gap?
I'm excited about that possibility, right? I think there's been, at first the technical community has been like, oh, okay, it can accelerate us writing code. But more and more we're seeing things where LLMs are actually replacing whole code bases when we're just saying, act like a tool that does this, and there's actually no code under the hood, right? So that combined with being able to cobble together several different prompts, there's more and more visual composition tools for some more advanced engineering. It's making it more and more accessible, which is one of the things that excites me most of all, is that more and more people can be involved in building and actually creating new applications, which is my passion.
For sure. I have a question here from Leslie. Leslie is asking, are there data guidelines specific to AI data segmentation, caching, and language collection on the horizon?
Oh, I guess let's double click on that. So data guidelines for caching, et cetera. Is this like an architecture of large language model apps question? I don't know. This is getting a little deep in the architecture.
I think we might be asking more about sort of more like the copyright ownership issues. Maybe
Gotcha.
Leslie can clarify if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, I think we're thinking more about the guidelines specific to capturing that data and using the data.
Got it. I do think that obviously right now there's a whole raft of authors of companies like Bloomberg who are launching lawsuits against some of these large language model providers for using their content without their permission. So I do think this is going to be a large battle over the next coming while of what does it mean? What does ownership mean? Is something being in the public domain sufficient for it to be used in these models for training? And if not, do they still have enough content to be as reliable and as capable as they are? I do think it's going to take regulation takes a long while to keep up. Of course, I think those systems are moving as quickly as they can. It's interesting to see the different approaches in North America, where traditionally, especially the US, has approached this from, we're going to hold the end users accountable, right? So you see this, like, if you use ChatGPT and your content you put out in the world plagiarizes, you as the user, ChatGPT, is responsible, right? And that's where all of these tools have been very clearly saying, we're not liable for any damages. If there's any repercussions to advice you get from this tool, it's not on us. In Europe, they take a different approach of actually trying to hold the companies themselves accountable.
Mm.
And it seems like somewhere in the middle, the large language model providers have recently signed on with the Biden administration in the US to some agreements around responsible AI development and the collection of the data. But it's still very high level and hand wavy in terms of, when it gets down to brass tacks, what data can they use and what kind of outputs are they going to be responsible for and outcomes.
Yeah, it's interesting. It raises another question, and this is my question, but I do think that we do have some students in the audience, and you may or may not be able to comment on this, but we've talked a lot about sort of like prototyping and entrepreneurship, using this in the professional context to accelerate productivity and workflows, and it's amazing. I'm just wondering how you see all of this playing out in the academic context. And if you kind of have any thoughts on ways to put, I don't know, parameters, guidelines, double checks in place.
I think there's the open source community is doing, a good job, I think, of trying to put some of these things in place and trying to build like a common understanding of how we should be using them, how we should be measuring them, right? So that very first question we had around like, which model is best? How do I know when to use which one? Having data sets that we're sharing, saying on this data set, let's compare all the models, right? That's one good starting point for having kind of a community of practice around how we should be using these, right? And then having more and more enshrined standards, both, whether they're at the corporate level trying to anticipate regulation or whether they come top down from government around what do we say is the responsible way to use these, right? Are we going to put automated things in place that use the content from this? Or is that something that we know is taking a huge risk and we're not comfortable doing that? I think each of us as individuals and then the companies themselves need to start looking ahead and kind of, if we don't want to look back and, look terrible in hindsight, we can, as long as we know the risks involved, we can start to make some decisions about what do we want to say is our best practices and sharing those best practices, finding those communities where we can share them and agree on what are we agreeing as a society is how we're going to leverage these in a way that they are still the co-pilot, right? I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Pilots haven't gone away. Pilots are still in control. But there's some things that machines are better at, especially when it comes to monitoring things or drudgery.
Automation.
Let them do, automation. Let them do the part they're good at so we can do more of the human side.
For sure. I think we have time for one more question. And this question, I'll read the question. It's another question from Leslie. Leslie is asking, are you caching keywords or paying for every call out to Chat GPT? And I think the nature of that question for me is about, how much does all of this cost? Like it's a very common experience that it's great. I'm in there, I'm using it, it's free. And then bang, I'm locked out. And now $20 a month, $30 a month, once I cobble together all of these,
Right.
subscription prices. So what are your thoughts on that? Is there a cost barrier to entry that we're seeing?
One thing that this is why I think I always term this as like prototypes, right? So I do think things are moving so quickly. We're all learning together. Leslie's question is a really great one in terms of that next step of like, I've built something and it's useful. Okay, how do I make it robust? How do I make it cheap? And actually, now we're getting into some engineering challenges that aren't solvable necessarily with no code tools.
Right.
Yet. Right. The no code tools are behind in a lot of those respects. So I do think that as that becomes more popular, that's the kind of thing that will be built into these tools as people understand, I really only want to answer these kinds of questions. Caching refers to being able to, if you've seen this similar question before, you don't have to pay for GPT, you save it somewhere, right? But now we're getting into, this is where you get into developing a system more robustly using engineering engineering best practices. That's really what the apps have, the applications that are out there, that's really what they're trying to do, is try to do that. So they take care of that for you, but they aren't necessarily as personalized to the tools you use or your own information. It's like that trade-off. But great question.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can prototype very, very effectively, but at some point we're probably still going to have to hire an engineer.
If you want to build it into a product, or
Yeah.
if you're really determining like this is a super valuable use case, this is saving us, $20,000, $200,000 a year, right? At that point, you need to do that trade-off of, is it worth, what's the return on investment of actually building this more robustly?
All right. We're at the end of our time for the Q&A. Thank you so much, Polly. That was amazing, very exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed presenting, and thanks so much. To let me know if you have further questions offline.
All right. Thank you so much.